Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 374, and I had a conversation with Daryle Lamont Jenkins. Daryle is the founder and executive director of the One People's Project. Growing up in the punk rock music scene, he was entrenched early on in political activism, and he founded One People's Project to go up against alt-right groups and hate groups. He gained a reputation of publicly documenting these groups and has helped neo-Nazis leave those circles. He's also a producer, most notably Skin, which was based on Erasing Hate, the story of another former Hey Human guest, Brian Widener. That was episode 31. Daryle self-identifies as Antifa and as an anarchist. Really interesting conversation, and his story, super fascinating. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. And look for my albums. All I Ever Wanted Was Everything, How to Say Goodbye, Servicing to Breathe. They're all out there in the music places. Check out my relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. It's on YouTube under Are We There Yet Podcast Show. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, take care of each other, lift each other up, be kind, and here we go. Daryle Lamont Jenkins, welcome to Hey Human Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Susan.
It's good to see you.
Same.
I learned about you actually a few years ago. I had interviewed Brian Widener, and he spoke of you very highly and said how amazing you are. And I put it in my notes, and I was going through some paperwork the other day, and I thought, oh, wow, I can't believe I never reached out to him. So that was probably, I want to say that was 5 years ago, maybe more.
Boy, yeah, I would think so. That would have been about the time everybody was working with the two of us, and I think because that was when the movie Skin came out, short film, and the feature. And we were just all over the place around that time. We talk about 2018, 4 or 5 years ago.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Because I know Saturday's my birthday. And on my birthday in 2018, I was basically doing press for the movie. We was just doing the junket all up and down New York City, ended up on the Daily Show. We were just having a ball. Brian missed all that, unfortunately, because there were just some things that they couldn't nail down, but I definitely made sure that everybody remembered that it's his story and that it was and he did get involved in some of the interviews here and there, but unfortunately there were things going on in his life that kept him away from coming to participate in the junkets and all of that. But he was still very much so responsible for why we were out there in the first place. So we had to make sure that this is his story and this is who you're going to learn from the most.
Yeah. Well, happy birthday.
Much appreciated. I thank you. I'm going to go to a punk rock show on that day. My friends, there's a band called the Bouncing Souls that are going to be playing in Jersey, and I'm going to be there.
I love it. That's great. What a fun way to spend a birthday.
Oh, indeed.
Let's get into your story. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born here, well, not here where I'm at right now, but in North New Jersey. I was raised here where I'm at right now. Somerset, New Jersey. Had a father that was just basically a teacher, an educator, a counselor. My mother was also a teacher and a nurse and a missionary. So you had all these kinds of worlds that were coming in, and basically being that education was the family business, because it wasn't just us. It was also my uncles on my father's brothers. They were all educators, and all I did was read World Book Encyclopedia, and that was my life. I was the quintessential nerd. It was World Book in the house, so that's what I read, and I just read it religiously. I shouldn't say religiously, because Mom would probably get upset about that, but she'd be reading the Bible religiously. But
did you have a very religious home then, with your mom's influence, or was it more grounded in education? Yeah, okay.
Yes, both. Because, my mother made sure that our spiritual soul was in check, and Mom and Dad made sure that the educational, the knowledge soul was there too. So, it was important, and it still is. It really still is. It also helps me whenever I have to deal with some of these religious whack jobs who, for what it's worth, are bearing false witness out there as they try to undermine everybody's freedoms and liberties to think for themselves as they were allowed to. So it's really important to maintain that spirituality and such for myself, not just for some sort of political tactic, but also to make sure that your soul's straight, that you are going to be good for the rest of your life and beyond. That it is important.
The work you do now is caring to make sure that the people who are marginalized, or people who aren't represented right, or people who are, as you said, trying to just live their lives freely and come up against those who wish to oppress them. When you were a little kid and growing up in your house, was there a concept of that also, or is that something you learned as you got older?
No, that was a concept of that. It wasn't like my parents were political or anything like that. And it shouldn't really be a case of being political to think that way. But, it was always my direction to be there whenever somebody needed help. Just recognizing the humanity of everybody, that was always the way I was. And I also knew that somewhere down the line, I was going to be fighting for people. I didn't know how. I just knew that the music that I gravitated towards when I was a kid, the things that I want to watch on TV, they spoke to that. They spoke to me being driven in that direction. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, I told people, I betted them $100 that I would sue the Klan by the year 2000. Didn't sue the Klan, but I don't think anybody cares if I welched. So, but I made up for, but I most certainly did a number on the Klan and other groups out there. So I guess that would probably make up for it.
I think that makes up for it. What made you join the military?
Simply my father said it was a good idea, because I was looking at college. And looking for ways to fund college. And my father was talking about it was a good way to not only get money for college, but also get the experience that you are going to need when you apply to jobs and such. And that was what I was focused on. Unfortunately, my time in the service was not the most exemplary. I didn't do the things I wanted to do, and I didn't do the things they wanted me to do. So it didn't last long, and I was gone. So, but only thing I knew to do from then on was just basically chart my own path, because that was one of the biggest problems I had with the military. I didn't feel that I was in a position to basically grow within myself. There was nothing there for me in that regard. And that's the biggest mistake that you can make going into the military, thinking that you're going to be an individual. They will always tell you that. But and it cost me. Dad was a little annoyed by the fact that I didn't tell him I was kicked out. But Dad was still annoyed for years after I left. But I think I let a lot of people down in the military. There were people that were relying on me, people that were friends of mine, people that were fighting for me when I wasn't fighting for myself, but most importantly, I had a job to do and I failed to do that job. And because of that, I got to live with that. You'll never hear me badmouth soldiers. You will never hear me badmouth soldiers. You will never really hear me badmouth the military per se. Even though I'm a leftist and I do have an issue with the military-industrial complex, you'll never hear me just diss the service outright. And the main reason why is because I think I owe it to them not to.
At that time of your life, was it more about not really knowing who you were yet as a person, or were there other things coming at you?
I think it was more or less a case of I knew what I wanted to do in life very early on. I just didn't know how to do it. So, took my father's advice and joined the military to get a leg up. Now, my father was right. Let's be real. My father was right. What my father didn't pick up on is the fact that I didn't want to do that. And it was also a matter of, even if I didn't want to do it, there was a way to do it do what I wanted to do in the military, and I did everything wrong. So, I think it was just really a case of not knowing how to do the things I wanted to do. So,
and which branch was it?
Air Force, the Cadillac of the military. It's probably it was the service that you would try to join. It's the closest to civilian life that you can get in the military, to be honest. And, it didn't work out for me regardless.
Well, what happened next? Where did you go from there?
Oh, I immediately went into college. Still failed that one. But but even with that, even though I didn't do too hot in college, I still was able to find a little bit more of a footing and of a direction that I want to go into. So I really wanted to get into media. And that's what I was trying to do when I was in the military, and that failed miserably. But I wanted to get into media, and that happened the moment I went into my first class and all that. Started getting myself situated. By the time I left the military, by the time I left school, I was doing public access shows. I was doing in the punk scene, more or less. I was not even more or less, more. I was definitely in the punk scene here in New Jersey, particularly New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I started trying to chart a path that was kind of like off the beaten path. So I was kind of like in the underground media. That's where the public access came in. I had a little home video camera where I basically videotaped bands that they were performing, bands that probably never made it. Some bands did, like the Bouncing Souls, as I mentioned, interviewed them and then just put them on blast on TV shows that I put together.
Did you find yourself drawn to the punk scene because of what that scene really represents? I think people think of punk music and they just think people with shaved heads jumping around in leather and beating each other up, but it's really rooted in folks who are trying to stand up against overbearing authority. The music is very much for people.
I think my motivation towards what attracted me, I should say, is the fact that you can come as you are, really. And that was one of the biggest issues that I had coming up. The moment I got into the scene, I felt like everybody was down to earth enough that I can be a part of it. I can be one with this crowd because beforehand, I got out of the military and I started trying to hook up with one music scene after another, but everybody had put on airs and you couldn't really talk to them unless you really hung out with them. And a lot of people were really hard to hang out with. And on top of that, it really wasn't the style of music that I was going, going for. I mean, yes, I listen to metal, I listen to hip hop, of course, but it was more about, I don't hear me in any of the songs that were really popular at the time or really what everybody was singing. When I got into that punk scene, I heard it all. And the best thing about it was when people got off that stage, they sat they became a part of the audience and cheered the next band on. And then we all went to somebody's house to chill out. And then you found out that other people were in bands or wanted to start bands, and you didn't even have to know how to play all that well. It was just an opportunity to, as I said, be who you want to be, however you want to be. You came as you are. And then we got into the political stuff. And then we got into the more aggressive nature of how we approached life. When we was, you can be critical about, say, Ronald Reagan or George Bush and all of that as a Democrat or as an anarchist. One thing to be critical, another thing to say, okay, so what are we going to do about George Bush? And I went in the direction of what we were going to do, not necessarily about George Bush, but also how are we going to deal with this issue that we have right here? We're trying to urge people to donate money to the such fund to help people eat or something like that, or you can start a food bank yourself. You don't have to wait for anybody. That's where I started coming in with the punk scene. That whole DIY, do-it-yourself attitude that came along with it. That was important to me. And that's why, I called it home and still call it home.
Did you feel like an underdog growing up at all? Did you feel like obviously you're a Black guy. When you were growing up in that era, I think there was a whole other thing going on. I don't know about New Jersey, but certainly across the country where there was a lot of marginalization, the planned destruction of Black communities and all that. Did you experience any of that?
It's weird because I didn't think of it as, I didn't really consider myself marginalized in that regard. Not that, Black people were catching hell, but, I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in Black suburbs, no less. So I saw Black people doing okay. But I also saw what things on the news that made you go, okay, there are people who don't like that all that much. So, but I wasn't really politically rooted until after I started reading a little bit more Dick Gregory, started listening to Whoopi Goldberg a little when she first came out. Public Enemy started coming in. I mean, I was politically astute, but I really just went above and beyond after I started hearing people say things that I needed to hear, and that wasn't until 6 months before I got kicked out of the military. So I wonder why that happened.
Well, I was just going to say, I can imagine, as you spoke to a minute ago, the military is about creating a hive mind and not about an individual. If you are an individual in the military, they root that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me that if you were trying to individualize within that system, that doesn't really mesh well.
It's weird because August 11th of this year is going to be the 50th anniversary of hip hop. August 11th of 1988, I was in Hampton Coliseum, and I saw basically the history of hip hop. You had Stetsasonic come on stage. I was actually serving in the military with the brother of someone from Stetsasonic, Daddy-O's brother. And so there was that. Then you had EPMD, who I was who just started coming up. They started putting the banner up for Public Enemy. Everybody was wondering who Public Enemy was. They didn't know, and everybody was just waiting to see what they would sound like. And they we all didn't know what the hell hit us after that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was the turning point. And then, it was actually Run DMC's show. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince came on after Public Enemy, and they definitely tore it up. Run DMC tore it up. But I was going home thinking, Public Enemy. Public Enemy to this day is my favorite hip hop crew of all time. So it's just like, I was so glad I went to that show. But that show pretty much got me kicked out of the military because my attitude changed. I got in trouble. I got my final bit in trouble was me cussing out my supervisor in January of '89. And that was just a couple of months after I saw the show. My attitude was changing. But it doesn't negate the fact that I was still, not doing the best job I could when I was in the military. But part of the reason why was because I didn't belong there. And, I was just really feeling stymied for real after I saw that show. And I was like, I gotta get out. I have no business here. A couple of months before then, I actually got annoyed because there was a spin article, a cover story on LL Cool J, and Public Enemy. And this is how I heard Public Enemy before because this was at a time when you could buy hip hop albums without listening to them and not be disappointed. And I bought Public Enemy's first album that way. I liked what I saw on the back cover. I was reading this article and they really started slamming Public Enemy in the opening, who was opening for LL on this particular tour. And they particularly got upset because Chuck D had said something about how they're fighting the Klan. And they did the typical thing that they did in the 80s. They basically said that even the black people were annoyed by that, saying, "Oh, we just want to listen to the music." I was like, "Oh, brother, no, this is what we want to listen to." I mean, and it was a couple of months later, I got a chance to see Public Enemy live and see exactly what they were complaining about in that Spin magazine. I was like, "Oh, what's wrong with this?" And by the way, I actually knew that Public Enemy was going to do that because Bring the Noise and Rebel Without a Pause was on the radio at the time, and they were saying things like Farrakhan's a prophet anything you ought to listen to, and it was a loud, proud supporter of Chesimard. As a kid, remember, I really wasn't involved in politics yet, but as a kid, I never heard that. I never heard people defend Farrakhan. I never heard people defend Chesimard, aka Assata Shakur. So when I heard it on the record, I was like, what? What did I just hear? Really now? Okay. My job in the military was a police officer. I was in my gate shack hearing Public Enemy sing this. And I was like, man, wow. And I wasn't hit until I actually saw them on stage. And
do you feel like in that moment it woke up the thing that you were always going to be?
Yeah, because I do remember leaving the show saying to myself, I am never going to be told that I can't do something anymore. And that's all I heard while I was in the military. I said, that's going to stop. So yeah, I definitely had, like I said, I had an attitude after I got out of the show. I had an attitude, not naked attitude, but I knew that there was a direction I needed to go into. And that's when I started getting into more arguments with folks in the gate shack, political arguments. Respectful arguments.
Sure.
But I was talking about Whoopi Goldberg's what Whoopi Goldberg was saying on her cassette tape. I was listening to some of her HBO special on tape at the time, and that also resonated with me. The second one, where it was just Fontaine, the the character Fontaine.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was really what sent me. That was really what sent me. And, you know, Dick Gregory, I started reading more of his books, his old books from back in the 60s. And I was learning a lot from that. I was just like, I can't do any of this while I'm here. So, you know, once I got out of the military, I just basically hit the ground running. How can I? And when I got out of the military, it was about the same time the Central Park jogger thing happened. A couple of months later, Bensonhurst happened. And then, you know, everything started to snowball. Ed Koch got fired and David Dinkins came in. And oh boy, I mean, this was the world I was growing. I was leaving the Air Force to go into, and it was like, yeah, I'm gonna be this. And I wasn't in the punk scene yet. I was still trying to figure out what direction I was going into in regards to that.
As a kid, since you were growing up insulated, you know, you had a great family, you were in a suburb that was, you know, you weren't trying to find people that look like you. I think representation was all around of successful, happy.
We had Black history courses in our school. We had an African American history course. Everything was fine. My parents knew exactly what neighborhood they wanted to raise their kids in.
Sure. So when you left the bubble of that loveliness, and now suddenly you're out of the military, there's rhetoric on the news, in the music, everything around you. How did that shape you being a Black man in America too? Because suddenly this kid who grew up going, what's the big deal, is now realizing it's a big deal of how people are being treated.
Yeah, because I think when I was remember, I said I was a cop when I was in the military, and boy, was that an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener as to how I should conduct myself as a Black man, number one. And number two, how other police officers saw Black people in the military, even when we were in the military. But there was also the thing about how women were treated. I mean, I don't even want to start talking about the homophobia, because unfortunately it was the 80s and even I got caught up in that because it was during the time of AIDS. I mean, I wouldn't say that I was a homophobe, but I was a homophobe. You know, there was, I mean, you know, you had the attitudes that, you know, that were prevalent. If you were caught up too much in the mainstream of any society, you're going to get caught up in the bad as well as the good. And that was the bad. I wasn't mean to anyone or anything like that. I was just, I guess, a centrist about it, because I never met anyone that was gay. You know what changed all of that? When I met my first gay person. That should not be the case. That should not, and I met my first gay person at the first punk show I went to.
That was quite an education, that punk show.
Yes, it was. I mean, it wasn't so much that I was homophobic or anything like that. I mean, you know, I'm bouncing back and forth me saying I was and I wasn't. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think. But I had to learn. There was a learning curve that I had to get on, and like immediately when the AIDS crisis hit, I was very uncomfortable about the jokes. For example, I mean, I knew that something was very wrong about how Rock Hudson was treated. And I mean, his entire career was just like wiped out. Now that was all anybody knew. And then when Liberace died, I'm not sure whether or not if it was in fact AIDS, but when there was rumblings, I was like, you're about to do that to Liberace too. But again, none of that mattered. None of that resonated with me until after I got on that to start really enjoying the world. I really do think that it wasn't so much trauma that put me on the path, you know, put me on a political path or anything, but just the fact that I was really experiencing life more, you know, once I got out of the military, especially. When I was in the military, I saw a lot of negative, but I didn't resonate with me yet. When I started going to college and started being involved in the scenes more, I really started to enjoy the people around me and felt I needed to protect them. I'm really just thinking about it as we're going along here. That's why I like doing these things.
You founded One People's Project, which is an anti-fascist. It confronts nationalism, it confronts racism, confronts homophobia, confronts all the isms, schisms.
Right.
What made you decide it was time, as you said, to not be a part of something, but to do the thing and, not to join someone else's, but to start your own?
Well, it also goes back to, I knew what I wanted to do, but didn't know how. I really had been following and just keeping an eye on the white supremacists for a long time, but only if they showed up on TV. It was when I was in the Air Force, I was in my dorm, I turned on the TV, and Oprah Winfrey was going after some white supremacists who called themselves skinheads. And we were just learning about them in the mainstream. And that made me realize I need to start keeping a file, rather start recording a lot of these racist groups whenever they show up on TV so I can study them. When I got out the Air Force, I started studying talk radio because they started talking like the folks that I saw on all those shows. I mean, and I'm talking about not just like Rush Limbaugh or somebody like that, because he was doing that. But there was a guy in New York named Bob Grant who would let neo-Nazis leave their contact information on his airwaves. He was on 77 WABC, which and for someone to be on that mainstream of a outlet says that, yeah, we better pay attention. Of course, Pat Buchanan was out there saying things that made me raise an eyebrow or two there. And I didn't realize where he was going until we really started paying attention. So, we're watching all of this. And there were very few opportunities to go after full-on neo-Nazis or white supremacists here in the state of New Jersey. But I was still documenting, and I was still keeping an eye on whatever it was anybody was doing at the time. And then in 2000, there was a white supremacist rally being held in Jersey, and we had to mobilize. And because I had been doing a lot of compiling of information, I had all the information anybody needed to deal with the various individuals. We started a website to coordinate our counter efforts. After the rally, we used the website to not only coordinate efforts to help people that were getting arrested, but that had gotten arrested, but also to keep learning more and more, keep helping people learn more and more about the white supremacists that we had dealt with. And we expanded it to all of them. As a matter of fact, we expanded it to anyone that was on the right or / far right, because our initial meeting was to, our initial mission was to show the connections between that far right and the mainstream right. And we were pretty good at it. We were very good at it. And that was really the beginnings of One People's Project.
Was it easy to find like-minded people to help you to get into the flow?
No, it was not. Matter of fact, that's why we're a small group today, because, people want, you have a lot of people who are active, but they can sometimes get caught up in the tried and true methods, like being out there in the streets and all of that. Whenever they announce that there's going to be a rally on the courthouse steps, with they being the neo-Nazis, that we hope to be there. We plan to be there. We plan to counter them. We wanted to get a little deeper. We wanted to get them on their off time. And our thing has always been, going back to being a nerd, was studying them, trying to find out who they are, where they come from, and what they're about, and putting that on websites so people can have the information. That has been our mission since 2000.
you have gone and gotten into, I would say, people's faces, but you've had all sorts of interactions. You've had conversation. You've gotten into brouhahas. Yeah. How does one, or how do you particularly approach somebody who has this mindset in order to, I mean, is your goal, I'm sorry, I'm like tripping over myself. Is your goal to change their mind, or is your goal to say, we know you're doing this bully energy, we're not going to stand for it. Just know you're on watch, that there's people out here that know what's going on and what you're doing, and we're not going to let you get away with this. What is your mindset?
My mindset is to protect those that I care about. My mindset is to protect the society and communities that I care about. That is always going to be first and foremost my mission in life. Sometimes that involves having a conversation with the other side, if that's possible. Other times it does mean straight up fighting. Now, fighting them means being aggressive in trying to keep them from positions of power. Other times, and you try to make this as the last resort as much as you can, but other times it does mean swinging. Now, years ago, in the 90s, we went straight to the swinging. But when you're 32, 33, 40, try not to do that as much. At least I try not to do that as much. But it's there. It's there. And it all depends on how they are approaching you. I mean, the movie Skin actually shows this in the beginning. I mean, it shows the yins to the yang. Yeah, I'm going to be yelling and screaming and talking trash to you if you're in your little rally. If you're aggressive towards me, I'm going to be aggressive towards you. And on the other hand, if you want to talk, if you want to chill, if you want to try to make your case even, I'll lend an ear. We'll talk. Sure. And if you're looking the way to get out, I'm there for you too. I mean, I'd rather you not be an enemy. I mean, I'd rather the situation would be that there is less fighting and less tensions between the two sides. So if there's any opportunity that arises that allows for that, yeah, I'm going to take it.
In your experience, and I think of Brian, who obviously was in one of the most violent, dangerous white supremacist skinhead groups, and then turned the corner and was actively speaking out against it, and credited you when I interviewed him, at least in 2018, 2017, whenever that was, that he spoke of you as one of his best friends. There's a huge arc of an experience. What do you personally think is the thing that draws people into being racist or homophobic or whatever it is that they've decided to hate for hate's sake? And what is the key to pulling them out of that?
Everybody comes from someplace, and I think when that someplace for certain people is a dead end, or at least seems like a dead end, they want to try to change that because they got to live that life. And when you're frustrated, when you have a lot of that psychological damage that comes from such dead ends, you're reaching out to anybody who can help turn you around and put you on some good footing or what have you. And I think it's always a matter of who those individuals end up being. Sometimes it can be a positive thing, like say a religious group or a civic organization or our side. Other times it can be the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, the far right, whatever is there to say, we'll keep you afloat, is going to be where you're going to go. And that's what we see. We are fighting people who are basically fighting themselves. in many respects. There's that old saying, hurt people hurt people. And when it comes to dealing with them, even though we are assertive against them in one fashion or another, we also recognize their humanity and try our best to help them recognize their humanity. I mean, that's a line that I use all the time, but it's an important line to note, not just to help people understand where we're coming from, but to understand where society in general is coming from, because society really doesn't want this kind of drama. I mean, we have built a pretty nice society around here, and people should be able to appreciate it. All people, even the ones we have issues with. And unfortunately, and so we try to encourage those that we do have issues with to get off the high horse, for lack of a better term, and start looking at what you're missing.
What happens when, as you spoke to in the beginning of this conversation, people hide behind a God front in order to spout their hate? Then how do you go up against a God image?
Well, it always will depend on the individual. However, having said that, it does require a recognition that when you're starting to deal with people who are coming from that Christian Reich kind of thing, that there's something else going on, something else that's totally removed from spirituality. Now, because and that is what I'm dealing with in this day and age. Now, let me preface that by saying that in say like the early 90s, you did have evangelicals that were in fact evangelicals that did truly believe in God, that did truly believe in serving Him. But when you are dealing with the folks today, now it's just a tactic. And I'm going to have to preface that even further, because I was at the Moms for Liberty conference here in Philadelphia about a month or so ago, almost a month ago, believe it or not. Wow. And there was a speaker, the president of the Heritage Foundation named Kevin Roberts, was hyping up a book called Roots of the American Order by Russell Kirk. Russell Kirk is known as a guru of conservative ideals to other conservatives. I look at him as a segregationalist, as a hate monger, and as an anti-Semite, because that's what he was. And he has written extensively on all of that. But the one thing that he has said in the past is that God, you don't choose God, God chooses you. And no, that's not how this works. You are supposed to come to Jesus. And this is what how Christianity has been for over a couple of thousand years. Jesus has died on the cross for your sins, and you are to accept Him as your Lord and personal Savior. It isn't Jesus died on the cross for the living heck of it, and you can come if He chooses you.
That idea that you're anointed in hate. See, I've been anointed to. Yeah.
So it's like, so we already know the point I'm making is that we're already coming from a position where they are lying about their faith, where they are bearing false witness. And that means it's phony. Okay. That means it's phony. And so, when you're dealing with these characters coming up to you in the name of God and liberty, it's all a game. It's all a lie. You're coming in that direction. You're coming from that direction, even if you're not even about faith and not even about spirituality, about God or Christianity, whatever. You are more real than they are. When you're dealing with today's conservatives, and this is one of the reasons why the foundation that they had 30 years ago is non-existent. So when you're dealing with today's conservatives, you're dealing with people who are not trying to build, not trying to evolve, not trying to create. They're trying to win. And that's all that matters. They just want to win. And they have been steadily losing for the past 60 years. And the only thing that matters to them is that they turn that around. Remember, the whole thing about Donald Trump is that there was going to be so much winning that they were going to get tired of winning. You know, that's the whole message right there. But when they win, they lose because everybody loses. When they deconstruct everything that was supposed to make this society and this nation the bastion of freedom that it was supposed to be. Granted, there's some bumps along the road. I'm a black man. I better say that. But in the end, this society is supposed to be a society where you are supposed to have liberty and freedom. And they have taken it away in the name of preserving it. And the only reason why they're doing it is because the world doesn't revolve around their white Christian male dominated hierarchy. And they don't know what to do with themselves.
It's so bizarre to me as I watch the politicians take more and more rights away from people and the people handing them over freely in some cases. And all the while saying about how they believe in a government that's less involved. And yet, as we're seeing move across the nation, the massive oversteps of people's civil, human rights, liberties, all of this is mind-boggling.
It all goes back to the fact that they don't believe in a single word of what they're saying. Again, they're just trying to win. They're saying the right things to the right people, so that they can go ahead. Ultimately, if you really think about it, a lot of today's conservatives aren't even doing it because they believe in it. They're doing it to get paid. I mean, I remember when conservatives will come at you with some sort of skin in the game. But you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA. He just got a couple of $1,000s from some billionaire or some benefactor. I don't know if he was a billionaire, but to just start Turning Point USA, it's not his money.
We've heard them on hot mics. We've heard them in emails to each other or text to each other. They don't even believe the crap they're saying, but they know if they say it loud enough and often enough, they're going to make millions of dollars, whether it be from being a talking head or a book, it's the same thing with like the Y2K craze. And to put it in some other context, everyone's saying the end of the world was coming. And who made all the money? The people writing books about it, the people building bomb shelters or whatever, preppers, or there are people taking deep advantage, financial advantage of those who are easily made afraid.
And that's what irks me about Charlie Kirk. That's what irks me about Candace Owens. That's what irks me about Tommy Lauren. Those three individuals, none of them had real world experience. None of them have ever had a real job in their lives. And they're young and they don't even think they have to anymore because somebody gave them money to agitate against the rest of society, against those that actually do work for a living. You know, I mean, it really annoys me. And Ben Shapiro actually put this out. Now, Ben Shapiro really annoys me because you're talking about pretty much a child prodigy. This dude got his law degree at 22. He was on, he's a brilliant SOB.
Yeah, it's usually very smart people are at the forefront of this.
The problem is he gave somebody gave him some money. He started working with Breitbart and all that. He's not using it to practice law. He's now a grift. He's now just as one of the grifters. And he made it clear when somebody was insulting him, somebody was calling him out, and he says, yeah, I'll think about that when I'm laying on my bed of money. And then when he said that's all it's about.
Yeah, of course it is. And hate pays so much better than love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hate does. I mean, that's why, I have a job right now. It's basically that's other than what I do for a living, what I do here. I have a job that pays the bills. Their job is to go after those trying to pay the bills. That's it. I mean, I love it whenever we go out there and protest and these idiots on TV talking about, do they have real jobs? Do you work or anything like that? It's like, Sean, whose side? Or even complaining about professional activists and such. And I was about to say Sean isn't Sean Hannity because I was going to say, but Sean, who pays your checks? I mean, Rupert Murdoch's name is on your $1 million checks. All you do is be an activist professional. That's all your job. You go up there to talk trash about everybody that's doing something. That's really what I say about people like Ann Coulter and such, that they're talking about what we're doing. Do
you consider yourself Antifa, and what does that mean to you? And how did it get manipulated to mean something else in your mind?
I'm Antifa without question or apology. One People's Project email address for the past 20 years is Antifa and onepeoplesproject.com. Antifa is short for anti-fascist. And if you're against fascism, you're Antifa. Plain and simple. It's been like that since the 20s. Nothing's changed. What did change is the need to build up an enemy, the need to take down an enemy, and the need to propagandize and raise money, pretending that you're going after that enemy. That's why you would see so many, and this is the other thing that goes along with the conservative grifts, so many propaganda things that are just straight up lies that aren't truthful about a single thing that's going on out there. Like the biggest thing that I really annoyed anti-fascists a couple of years ago was they would mobilize the right, especially these far right characters will mobilize because they saw something online saying that Antifa, it's pronounced Antifa, so I make jokes about that one time, that Antifa was supposed to be going to this spot in a small town somewhere where none of us go. And so they will, in one case, it was Gettysburg. It was the Gettysburg Memorial Park. Nobody, and taking down Confederate flags that weren't there to begin with. And they will mobilize. They will have their events talking about how they're there to stop Antifa or whatever. And when we don't show up, they say it was a victory. It's like, no, we weren't planning on going out there in the first place. And in the case of Gettysburg, it was comedy because one of them found a way to shoot themselves while they were waiting for Antifa to show. There's a guy named, there's so many kind of propagandizing routines that they pull. It's ridiculous. There's one guy who pretends that he was Antifa back when he was in high school and all of that, and no one knows who he was or is, but he makes a lot of money writing books and doing speaking engagements talking about his time as Antifa, and the only thing that you can find on him politically is when he started a libertarian group in his college days, and he's always been right wing in the public eye until he decided to pretend that he was Antifa. I'm not saying his name for the sake of not giving him any credence because he hasn't been heard from in a while.
The thing that really surprised me is how fired up people get on lies. And that they really will just take it at face value and not dig any deeper than just the surface, which says, I think, a lot about what the nature is in their heart of what they want to believe. I remember people saying, oh, the Black Lives Matter protests are destroying Portland and it's on fire, or New York's this or that. And I have friends all over the country. So I just called up my friends in Portland. Hey, are you guys okay? Are things falling apart? Talking to actual people that live there. And everyone said, everything's fine. I don't know what that's all about, but that's not true. And I would report that back and they would say, nope, that's not true. And I say, I'm talking to the people that literally live there, and they're saying the things you're being shown are a lie, but their hearts want to believe the lie before they believe the truth because it supports whatever stuff is going on inside of them.
It's weird too, because I remember, I've been to Portland a couple of times. The only people that were really doing violence in the times that I were there were the police and the Proud Boys. As a matter of fact, the last time I was in Portland, it was Proud Boys that were attacking people and turning over their vehicles. One of them is in jail right now for that nonsense. But that gives you an idea of, it's more, it's easier to believe the lies in some cases. For some people, it's more important. I remember watching Jordan Klepper of The Daily Show.
Love him.
Talk about having a discussion with a Trump supporter who had said something about John Bolton and all of that, and he challenged her on a particular point. And when he made that point about John Bolton and expected her to change her position, she just simply said, "I don't care." She didn't even care what the facts were, And that's when you realize you're dealing with something very different than, I should say, reason. You're dealing, again, with people who just need to win, no matter how much, how wrong they are, no matter how much they are losing.
Or who need to, or they need to attach deeply to hate because it makes them feel empowered or better than. As long as there's somebody or something to hate, for whatever reason, it triggers that dopamine cocaine response in their brain, and the hate becomes the drug.
Yeah, it does. And no better example than that is why I'm going to be in Nashville in about a month. It's because there's going to be a white supremacist conference that has been going on at Montgomery Bell Park for about a decade now, for about 10 years now. And we're going to do what we always do. We're going to be protesting against it. And they get very little opposition. Hopefully that'll change this year. And but because of that, they feel comfortable enough that in 2017, it was the organizers of Charlottesville went there to organize and network and get people out there. And when we saw what happened 2 weeks later, this year.
But there are people who still think that the people that died in Charlottesville were paid actors. Christ, there's actively
that
people.
Just goes back to the lie that they need to tell themselves in order to maintain themselves. Basically every time a white supremacist shows up, and we know they're white supremacists, they just call them feds. They're feds. This is the Fed op and all of that. And it was so funny because I was also in Idaho whenever Patriot Front had gotten arrested. And this was a couple of months after I saw them at the American Renaissance Conference. And when they were getting arrested, there was a guy who was trying to, who had basically organized. And by the way, I should say, when Patriot Front got arrested, they was trying to crash a Pride Fest in Idaho. And there were people outside that were protesting it, or trying to protest it and trying to march against it. The main guy that was trying to march against it was trying to say that Patriot Front getting arrested, that's just a Fed op. All the Patriot Front members are feds, yada, yada, yada. His right-hand man's sons were among those getting arrested. So, and by the way, speaking of that particular crowd, when you hear groups like Moms for Liberty, when you hear the agitation against the LGBTQ community because they're trying to go after groomers and such, when you think about the fact that Patriot Front was trying to storm and trying to cause some upheaval at a Pride Fest, note that one of the guys that got arrested is sitting in jail right now because when he got arrested, they found child porn on his phone.
Well, that's the other thing that's so frustrating. They scream. Yes. There's the rhetoric now screaming that LGBTQ plus or drag queens are groomers, and the truth of the matter is they're not looking in their own family, their own churches, their own coaches. All these things are coming out. None of those folks are LGBTQ or drag queens that are doing this stuff, and yet they just double down and triple down. And it's like, you know what? Take care of your own house first.
Well, see, that more than anything else really needs to be addressed by us if we want to see it go away. Because I always thought that it was weird how QAnon and all of them decided to use pedophile as a pejorative against people that they are fighting with. Just out of the blue, just call them a pedophile, regardless of whether or not you know anything about that person. Now we have this campaign against trans people, against the LGBTQ community, in the name of protecting children. And then we just keep on getting one story after another about these individuals from the right, from our religious groups, that are themselves assaulting children. I told people, look, sooner or later, we're going to find out somebody that went to the Moms for Liberty conference is getting jammed up because they themselves are abusing children. They themselves are watching child porn or whatever. And that tells us, never mind the fact that they're hypocrites. They're not hypocrites. They're trying, I think, in many respects, they're trying to deflect from a lot of what they see in their circles, a lot of what we all see from their circles. I mean, remember, we was all going after the Catholic priests just a couple of years ago, just about a decade or two ago. A couple of years after Sinead O'Connor was telling us to do it, and she got basically chased out of the country for that. Incidentally, I used to infiltrate anti-choice activists, and I went to one of their churches, and the pastor of one of those churches is on that list of Catholic priests. I found that out just a couple of months ago. And if we do have that issue, every time they come at us, every time they come at anybody in the name of protecting children, we should say exactly what you say. Take care of your own backyard. But add a caveat. Take care of your own backyard, or we will do it for you. Every accusation is a confession. But we got to go beyond complaining about it. We really do have to start putting pressure on them to start taking care of their own backyard. We're not just going to tell them. And here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to just go after what supports them. They're saying, look, we don't even have to mention the fact that they are coming after everyone else, trying to cancel people and trying to cancel books in the name of protecting children. In the name of protecting children, we need to go after their institutions. We need to make sure that the whole thing about Moms for Liberty is we basically went after the Marriott for even hosting them. And we have to start putting the pressure on any institution that caters to this particular crowd. If we find out that someone from their crowd has been engaged in that kind of activity, I think of the group, the Conservative Political Action Conference, is run by Matt Schlapp. I mean, the CPAC is really huge when it comes to conservative networking and organizing. That conference happens every year. We should be putting pressure on the National Harbor Resort in Maryland to say, because of Matt Schlapp's past activities, rather accusations regarding how he has sexually assaulted or what have you, one of Herschel Walker's aides, campaign aides, we really got to start and you got to bear in mind also, CPAC, that also means you have a number of people that are also been coming through that particular conference that have such accusations. We need to start putting pressure on the venues like National Harbor, whatever is in Orlando, Florida, and start saying, do we want to cater to their deflections? We have to start putting the pressure on venues and other institutions that help this nonsense along and say, stop doing that.
I keep seeing all over social media, there's all these posts about the new movie about the children trafficking. And I keep saying, there's been like 20 really excellent documentaries, not based on a true story, but actual true stories of movies and of organizations that are trying to stop this. But those folks don't seem to want to talk about any of that stuff. They only want to talk about this hyper politicized movie.
But we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So use the movie, which I heard was pretty good, but whatever. Use the movie to advance those groups.
I agree. I know it's a good.
So you like The Sound of Freedom? You like The Sound of Freedom? Well, these are groups that are actually dealing with human trafficking.
This is my argument.
Hype them. I mean, that's how you use the movie. And I'm going to remember anytime somebody talks to me about The Sound of Freedom, I'm going to say, look, there's these groups, and I would even ask, if you can, I don't know how you do it on your I don't know how you set up when you show the podcast. I would say maybe list it in this podcast when you in the I
have a link page
for this podcast.
Yeah. Every time I see anyone post about that movie, I always say, hey, since you're into this, check out these movies, and then I look for whichever state. And I say, this is the organization in your neck of the woods that is working very tirelessly to end human trafficking and sex trafficking of children and all of that. But here's that I found is that the ball drops there.
Yeah.
They want to be angry and yell and scream, but they don't actually want to be part of the solution.
But we know people do want to be part of the solution. We know people that are the solution, that will be part of the solution. I think we have to recognize who those individuals are on the right that are using the Sound of Freedom for political needs, and ignore all that because there is a real problem. Reason why it is so successful is because it is a real problem. It's based on a true story, and it needs to be addressed. We can talk about those that are in fact addressing it. And by the way, a number of those groups are run by people from the LGBTQ community, and that's how you use it. You don't even have to trash the movie. You don't even have to talk about the movie.
I have no feelings.
You don't even have to see the movie.
Yeah.
Just say, if this is your concern, if you're concerned about this, this is where we should be going. We should really be boosting these groups up ourselves. Say, hey, we've been doing this all along. QAnon hasn't. We have. So if you're concerned about it, this is where you go. This is where you go to find. And we don't have to go tit for tat.
No, I agree.
Say, it's just like whenever people talk about where they always come at me about black crime, no matter what the argument, no matter what the discussion, and they always say the same thing. It says, you always see people marching against the police. Why aren't they marching against the crime in their communities? My easy response is, we just had one yesterday. Because there's always, at some of these, in a lot of these communities, stop the violence rallies. There's always, I mentioned DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince earlier. DJ Jazzy Jeff and Charlie Mack, their bodyguard at one time, they put these kinds of rallies together in Philly. So I always say, hey, to all you conservatives out there that are looking for it, we can use you. And I'm not kidding. Some actually do show up to try to be a part of the solution. And that's good. But see, that's what I do. If you're talking about if you're talking about Black crime, why don't you help those within those communities that are actually trying to do something about it, instead of trying to use it as a way to shut me up because I'm talking about your crimes? Because in case you've forgotten, Derek Chauvin committed a crime when he murdered George Floyd. That doesn't get a pass because other Black people are committing crimes too.
That's right. The whataboutisms are really frustrating. Well, tell people the best way to find you, and if they want to be of service and help the cause, how to do that.
Well, okay. OnePeoplesProject.com is the best way to reach I'm very bad at self-promotion sometimes. I just like to teach. But here's the thing. OnePeoplesProject.com is where you can find find us. We're also on Facebook as One People's Project. We're also on Thread. Well, we're not on Threads yet as One People's Project. We're going to be today. We're on Twitter, for what's that's worth these days, as One People's Proj. We also have a news line called and we're on Instagram at One People's Project. We're also on Instagram we also have another website called IDAVOX, IDAVOX. It's named after Ida B. Wells, who we consider to be someone who has spoken out about things when no one else would. So IDAVOX.com. Twitter is IDAVOX at OPP. Instagram is just IDAVOX. And we can always use donations. We got stuff to sell. We got T-shirts and pins and CDs. Somebody actually made a CD to benefit us, and that's on our website right now. It's a punk CD, so I enjoy it. Watch the movie Skin on Amazon Prime. You can find the short film Skin that actually won an Oscar. It's on YouTube. You can find
Erasing Hate.
Erasing Hate is somewhere in the wind. I think it's on Tubi, TUBI. I think it's on that. There's also a documentary that I'm a participant in called Alt-Right Age of Rage. That was on Netflix for a while. That's in the wind now too. There's also a documentary called We Don't Walk in Fear, but you pretty much have to go to film festivals or invite me to your town where I can just show it to you, because we're not putting it out there yet. We want to see where it goes. And that's that. And but like I said, go to our website. We really could use the support, because I've been bouncing around the country for the past couple of months, and I want to keep doing that. I want to keep seeing everybody. I'm having a good time with that. So
if you come to California, to Los Angeles, let me know.
I will be in Los Angeles soon enough. I just don't know when. It's just a matter of somebody calling me and say, hey, come on out.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate all of this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and choose love over hate. I think that's the best way to go.
Indeed. Choose love over hate, because the residuals are better. Our slogan is hate has consequences, but love has its benefits, baby. Believe all that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
All right, take care.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.